After a long absence, we're finally back here on the set, creating content. It's exciting to be here. Got Arjun Walia with me. We're going to be talking about COVID-19. Lots to talk about here. Probably going to be a bit of a long show here. We've been joking about, this kind of stuff for a little while because you kind of have to have a sense of humor right now for a lot of different reasons. We're going to get into it in this show. We're going to be covering a lot of facts. We're going to be covering a lot of things that are going on. We're going to get to the conscious takeaways too, because there's a lot going on here with these events that really there's a lot to take away from what's happening with humanity, the awakening that we're going through, the stuff that we're experiencing, the thoughts that we're having, the stuff we're uncovering, the changes we're wanting to make in our lives and our society. So we're going to get into that as it relates to this entire subject, because the reality of the situation is what happens in our world, like we talk about all the time with collective evolution here, it's like what's happening in our world is just a reflection of collective consciousness. And we're at a time where waking up is a huge part of breaking the spell, breaking the illusion that we've been under for so long. And part of what's happening with COVID-19 is a huge awakening to that. So let's talk about this a little bit from the beginning before we get into some of the facts here. When this first started, we had the hysteria right at the beginning.
Well, right when it started, there were those mass predictions of millions of deaths in multiple countries, and it mainly came from that Neil Ferguson guy with these models in the UK who worked for an organization that's heavily funded by Bill Gates. Not surprising, but those models were way off. They did not, and scientists early on were calling out like how they did nothing but create fear and hysteria.
That's right.
Completely like ridiculous assumptions and predictions, like millions and millions. That right away panicked everyone and pretty much set the stage for authoritarian type measures to kind of commence. That's
right. And what's interesting about that is I remember after those numbers came out, a lot of people were talking about it. People were getting all big on the, hey, when things grow exponentially, they get really scary. Like, like people like if only, I remember even people on Facebook and stuff, it's like only if people understood the value of exponential jumping of numbers, like they would understand how dangerous this coronavirus is. And I'm like, that's if you assume this whole thing goes in an exponential pattern, which it probably won't, and it isn't, and it didn't happen in China. So why all of a sudden would it happen now?
And why is coronavirus so dangerous when all the information shows? I don't know if we're going to be talking about that today, but we should. Like, how dangerous is coronavirus really?
There's going to be a couple tidbits of that. There's going to be a couple tidbits, but
because there's so many respiratory viruses that circulate every single year,
that
already infect and kill millions and tens of millions of people every year. So
that many every year?
Yeah, tens of millions
every year,
every single year.
Wow.
5 million children alone die from acute respiratory illnesses every single year.
Wow.
So imagine those numbers are beamed up every single day.
And that's what I was saying.
People would go nuts.
That's exactly.
Like
even from the beginning, I kept saying if people only saw day by day the amount of seasonal flu cases, the amount of seasonal flu deaths, the amount of seasonal flu hospitalizations. If they saw that every day, they'd be like, whoa.
And not even seasonal flu, like other respiratory viruses more intense than the flu that have like 50% fatality rates in nursing homes. Like there's so many respiratory viruses, but it's crazy.
Right. So
and they can create fear so easily, like we were talking about with that initial prediction numbers,
And after Neil Ferguson, you had the Stanford study come out, right?
And sorry to interrupt, but Neil Ferguson wasn't even following his own advice. He was caught, and there have been multiple cases of that, not just Neil Ferguson, but it goes to show like these people really don't believe in what they're putting out.
We're living in an unscientific time.
Unscientific.
That's the reality of the situation, and that's kind of what we're going to get into as we go here. But it's like the reality of the situation is when we look at the Stanford numbers that came out, look at the media cycle again. Remember when that study came out that said, guys, relax, almost nobody's going to die from this thing. The fatality rate's going to be really low. The media cycle comes out and says, well, this whole study was irresponsible. This is a dumb study. It's wrong. Here are all the things that are wrong with the study. And they went through the list and did all that stuff. And now, I think it was like, a month later, the WHO comes out and says, actually, guys, we think the death rate's going to be this number. And so happens it matches that exact Stanford study.
Yeah, so many studies, multiple studies have come out showing that this is basically no more intense than the seasonal flu. The death rate's not much different from the seasonal flu. And I mean, that's what the data is showing, and it's still showing that. And we will go into the fact that not only that, but going to the fact that the number of deaths attributed to COVID has been massively exaggerated.
Sure.
So we'll touch on that later,
Absolutely.
obviously. But so many controversial things with COVID. Like when something like this happens, it shouldn't be so controversial. It should be, okay, this is happening and it's quite clear. Yeah. Now what we're seeing with global events, like every single year, is controversy and misinformation. And it shouldn't be like that.
No, it shouldn't.
There shouldn't be controversy at all. So
we should be a lot more grounded and calm, and we're going to talk about that too when we get into those two doctors. Yeah. But so the big question here that we're going to kind of keep as the underlying question as we go through all this stuff is, why is there a lockdown? And we're not asking that question from the standpoint of like, hey, why is there a lockdown? Like, hey, what's going on with COVID? Why are they afraid? And why is there a lockdown? It's more so, what is the actual agenda of the lockdown? What's going on with the lockdown? Because that's really what we have to look at here when we start talking about a virus that really isn't doing anything close to the numbers that we talked about. Even prior to doing a lockdown, people were saying, hold on, it's not going to be that bad. A couple of weeks after the lockdown, hey guys, it's really not going to be that bad. Yet we kept going and going and going and going. We got to ask the question, why? So let's talk about how a virus sort of gets through a community. We know that, and I know you're going to know this through a lot of your vaccine research too, but it's like when a virus, we'll just say comes into a community, whether it's a small community, whether it's a state, whether it's a full-on country, whether it moves through continents, it's pretty classic. What happens is it's either got to burn itself out or you got to have herd immunity, right? Yeah. And herd immunity, we know, grows by, typically the best way to go about it is you have the younger parts of the population who have the stronger immune systems, less potential diseases, less potential chronic diseases, whereas they take the brunt of the virus. Yeah. They build the immunity through the community, and then the people that are older or who have some immune deficiency and so forth, they don't really ever have to deal with the virus.
Yeah, basically that's herd immunity. If it's like measles, if everyone got the measles would disappear. Right. And they use that argument for vaccines. They're like, oh, everyone has to get vaccines to create herd immunity, but vaccines aren't 100% effective like natural viruses are. So you can never create herd immunity
with a vaccine. Yeah. But we know we can do that through naturally creating.
That's how viruses, they come in. All viruses, like flu, all respiratory viruses throughout human history, we've done nothing except take it. We're built it. They live. The viruses, they live with us forever. They've been around for millions, billions of years, and they come in. We get herd immunity, and that's that. That's the end of the virus. But today, it's like everyone wants to profit off something. Vaccine. Nothing else will work or can work. All the mainstream media has to do is create some controversy with other treatments or methods, and that's it. And basically keep telling people the vaccine is the only thing that can work. Yeah. But we've never done this. I mean, for respiratory viruses, there are vaccines for flu and stuff, but what we're seeing with COVID is very weird and unprecedented and very unnecessary, I believe.
For sure. And so let's get into the first part of this that we're going to start talking about. Now that we have a little bit of a context set up, right? We have recently this happened, and this is going to kind of play in through the whole timeline of what's going on with COVID since the beginning. But the World Health Organization came out. There was the woman there giving the press conference. I believe her last name was Kirkovy. Mm-hmm. And she is giving the press conference, and she's talking. She's asked a question, right? Sort of off the cuff. So you could tell this wasn't part of the scripted aspect of what she was up there to say. But she's asked a question that leads to her explaining that asymptomatic individuals actually don't really spread the disease. It's very, very, very rare. All the data, all the subsets, all the studies, everything that they've looked at so far shows that it's extremely rare that asymptomatic people, and what asymptomatic means is it's just people who aren't showing any symptoms. So they may have the virus, but they're showing no symptoms, right?
And before they were like, oh, asymptomatic people can spread the virus so easily, lock down, isolate, this and that. And now all of a sudden we're getting this, that they don't really spread it.
Well, and that's the point, right? Is that the asymptomatic people spreading the disease unknowingly was the whole reason, it was the whole narrative behind the lockdown. Yeah. And so then you have the World Health Organization coming out admitting like, hey, like it's in all the studies and everything we've seen, even back when they were looking at China, asymptomatic people really aren't spreading this.
Studies have come out, when all this started, a big one out of China came out saying asymptomatic people, most of them, up to 75%, I think it was, were probably false positives. Right. So those were tested positive for COVID, didn't even really have COVID. Right. And we'll get into that later on.
Sure.
For sure.
So let's play Kirkovy's clip here as she kind of lays out what's going on with asymptomatic people.
What proportion of asymptomatic individuals actually transmit? So the way that we look at that is we look at these individuals need to be followed carefully over the course of when they're detected and looking at secondary transmission. We have a number of reports from countries who are doing very detailed contact tracing. They're following asymptomatic cases, they're following contacts, and they're not finding secondary transmission onward. It's very rare. And much of that is not published in the literature. From the papers that are published, there's one that came out from Singapore, looking at a long-term care facility. There are some household transmission studies where you follow individuals over time and you look at the proportion of those that transmit onwards. We are constantly looking at this data, and we're trying to get more information from countries to truly answer this question. It still appears to be rare that an asymptomatic individual actually transmits onward.
So the interesting part is after she says this, the very next day, and there's an NBC News article here, where all of a sudden, the World Health Organization, they begin to backtrack. They start saying, hey, well, hold on a second. What she said wasn't, entirely accurate. And they're using careful language saying, I think she actually gave a quote saying that saying very rare was a little bit misleading and I shouldn't have really said that. It's like you can tell based on the statements that she makes here that she was pulled into a room or she was given a phone call or sent an email afterwards saying, hey, what you said didn't really match the World Health Organization's political stance. So notice there's a difference between their political stance and the actual science, right? Because the science and the data that she was reporting on shows that asymptomatic people are not spreading this disease.
And today's science is used and manipulated for political purposes.
Right.
We're seeing that with COVID more clearly than anything else.
For sure. And when you look at the connection between Bill Gates, right, and the World Health Organization, you start looking at the fact that the World Health Organization seems to be playing some sort of political game here to get people sort of in this whole idea of what Bill Gates is spreading, which is, because don't forget, he's a big stakeholder in what goes on with the World Health Organization, right?
Yeah. He comes out and says nothing's going to work but the vaccine.
The vaccine.
And with all, sorry to interrupt, but with all the alternative treatments that have worked, you see in China, peer-reviewed research, examples straight from the clinical trial, like the head of the clinical trial, I forget his name. Vitamin C in China has worked. That's proven. So they started even using it in New York hospitals, intravenous vitamin C. All they have to do here in mainstream media is ridicule the idea, call it fake news, and that's it. And vitamin C is done and has no chance. We've seen it with
hydrochloroquine.
That's
still an ongoing debate.
A lot of people, but all they have to do is make it a debate. If something is actually really working and shows a lot of potential, all the peoples whose interests are threatened by that, like vaccines companies, all they have to do is, they own the media. All they have to do is create doubt. There's no doubt with vaccines. Right? In the mainstream media, but everything
that's
else
already been ridiculed.
So you see what's going on here. I mean, even Madagascar, was it Madagascar?
No, it was, what was it? You're talking about the country who tested papayas and stuff like that.
We'll get to that later. That's Tanzania. Madagascar is using a herbal treatment.
Right.
Yeah, that's really, they left the World Health Organization like the United States recently did. And they're using an herbal treatment that their president says it works. It works. We're having success with it. We don't care what anyone else, World Health Organization says. This is what we're giving our citizens because it works.
It works.
And ridicule. They don't care. They're doing their thing. We don't see that kind of thing. It's not about what actually works for disease. It's what we can profit off of.
Well, and some of the, even just so far, some of the key takeaways I'm hearing here is it's like, what is happening, right? Like people, so you're talking about like the media just calling some, oh, hey, this is fake news, this is fake news, this is fake news, right? And it starts to show people like, well, hey, the media politicizes even hydrochloroquine, right? Trump said it was potentially useful. Therefore, the entire leftist media has to go against Trump because that's the rule.
It's not about what works in politics or what's best for humanity. It's basically about opposing the other person in the best way you can.
Right. And so it's like we have this big revelation. We can, a lot of what we talk about here, it's like, we're talking about facts. We're trying to just bring information. But so much of this is learning to question, learning to pull out of our biases, learning to pull out of the sides, right? And start looking, what are the mechanisms that are taking place? What is happening that confuses the population and for what reason, right? Here, we're trying as a society to say, hey, we have this virus. We don't yet know exactly how bad it is or this, that, whatever. And we want to find a solution. We want to help each other. So here's a potential here's a potential treatment, hydrochloroquine. Wait, but hold on. One guy said it who sits on a political side. So the other political side has to demonize it to shreds.
Yeah. Why don't we just come together? And if this is really about curing people, why don't we just come together all around the world, all these people, and say, okay, let's test this. Let's try this, see if it works. Come together. If this is working in this country, let's check it out. No.
And this is where we ask the question, right? Is politics really helping us, right? Is politics really serving humanity to thrive, to move through challenges like this, or is it literally just overcomplicating? It's pulling us into our emotions. It's pulling us into identities that really, at the end of the day, confuse the conversation, make it so that we're all fighting with one another and we can't actually come together.
And I think originally politics was created for that purpose, but it's moved far away from its original purpose.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to read a quote here real quick.
Yeah. As you're looking for that, interrupt me once you got it. Okay. But as you're looking at that, it's interesting because you have the going back to what we were talking about before with the asymptomatic people not spreading the disease. There was a study that came out, I think it was near the end of May. It was around May 24th, May 25th. That was talking about how 455 contacts were given, they were exposed to an asymptomatic person that had COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And the actual conclusion of that study, looking at how those people interacted with this asymptomatic people who should have infected them, right? The summary says that all 455 contacts were excluded from SARS-CoV-2 infection, and we conclude that the infectivity of asymptomatic SARS-CoV-2 carriers might be weak, meaning people who are asymptomatic cannot easily infect people, right? They had a 0% success rate in infecting people when they were asymptomatic.
And when we get to the testing with the Tanzania example, we'll see that, like people who have tested positive might not even have COVID, whatever COVID is.
Yeah.
And here's that quote I was going to read.
Yeah.
Behind that ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. To destroy this invisible government, to befoul the unholy alliance between corrupt business and corrupt politics is the first task of the statesmanship of today. Theodore Roosevelt said that.
Right.
But that's all I wanted to say because COVID, there's so much misinformation and business, politics. It's not really. This is why sometimes it's so hard to get to the truth because there's just so much misinformation out there these days. But I mean, people are getting to the truth. I mean, there's a whole revolution happening right now, and events like COVID just basically spark more questioning. They allow people to wake up, just like 9/11 did. Yeah. I guarantee you, so many more people woke up because of what's happening with COVID now and all the controversy surrounding it. They're like, "Whoa, my world's really not how I thought it was." And they're waking up to things,
Absolutely. And the reality of the situation is, after the World Health Organization comes out and says asymptomatic people are not really spreading this, it's extremely rare, which immediately says, well, hold on, we didn't need a lockdown at all. That's what that's essentially saying. You also have, and remember when, I think it was in the first maybe 3 or 4 weeks when COVID was really starting to hit the Western world pretty hard. What I mean by that is the media was really talking about it. An article comes out here. So they started talking about how at that time, COVID-19 was airborne, right? So this comes out June 1st. There was a health official in British Columbia, which is one of the provinces in Canada. She comes out and says, there's absolutely no evidence that COVID-19 is airborne. Meaning, so far, from a scientific perspective, there is zero evidence that this is even airborne.
It's not like cut and dry, okay, this is airborne, better wear masks, this and that. It's not like we know a lot about this virus. It's not like, okay, it's not like they can even identify COVID-19 with testing. It's not that simple. And for so many people to say that this virus isn't airborne, so many scientists and doctors are coming in and saying, no, this isn't as simple as it is. It's just another example of, how we're not being told proper things.
Well, and this is the challenge, right? Is because you have so many people who are afraid, right? This is a very fear-driven time.
It's all about
people fear. are afraid, and it's like you have doctors and you have scientists, you have people coming out saying, hey guys, there's good news here. you know, and we can move through this. There's good news, but we're just more fear. And it's making it so that the situation keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And it's illustrating, and this is part of what we'll get to even in more detail later, but it's illustrating that we really are not out here as governments, as health organizations, as people and so forth, you know, when we're disseminating information, we're not out here trying to actually bring the community together, trying to help people. We're kind of just trying to keep a narrative going. And
it's a battle of human consciousness. There's various interests trying to keep a certain narrative going, and mainstream media is owned, and they dominate. They push and project a narrative on the human population, and anything else that opposes that is fake news or conspiracy theory, regardless how much evidence and information there is behind it. Like, it's amazing how many like scientists, doctors, and epidemiologists have been censored on YouTube and by Facebook just for sharing their research and opinion, expert opinion. They've been banned and deleted and censored. Meanwhile, YouTube comes out, you know, we'll talk about this later, but anything that opposes the World Health Organization on social media these days is basically labeled as false news.
Right.
So there's this hard campaign to convince us of a certain narrative, and there's also a very, very hard campaign of censoring and ridiculing any information that opposes that narrative.
For sure. Right, and this leads us back to the whole idea of, you know, we know that there's been some doctors that have come out and that have said stuff, and you know, there's been this discussion around, okay, do we allow potentially dangerous information to disseminate? And so it gets into this question: is what's dangerous information, right? It's like you look at this whole idea that even those two doctors, Dr. Erickson and Dr. Massahi, I forget how to pronounce his name. Yeah. But they come out, they decide to do a press conference, right? And they basically are saying, well, you know, we're seeing information, we're seeing stuff that's going on. And they actually have an incredible quote that we'll play in just a second here. But it's like, we're seeing what's going on. We're seeing patients, we're treating patients. And what we're hearing from the experts is not really what, you know, is happening in real life. And we got to say something about this. So they hold an impromptu press conference. And let's just play the one clip here that I think just reveals so much, and then we'll talk about it here.
So when coronavirus was, we've been studying coronavirus since the 70s. And this type of coronavirus that came out was first and foremost transmissible through human beings, and that was new. And I think any time you have something new in the medical community, I've been a doctor for 26 years. Anytime you have something new in the community, the medical community, it sparks fear. And I would have done what Dr. Fauci did, so we both would have initially. Because the first thing you do is you want to make sure you limit liability and limit deaths. And I think what they did was brilliant initially. But you know, looking at theories and models, which is what these folks use, is very different than the way the actual virus presents itself throughout communities. And there's different communities we're talking about here. Bakersfield, a lot more widespread than Manhattan. Very, very different. So you can't really, theory and reality are not always the same. And that's what Dr. Erickson is presenting. It's not about being right or wrong. Medicine, what they teach us is you practice medicine. I'm learning every day. So is Dr. Erickson. We all learn every day. It's not about being right, who's wrong. It's not a basketball game, who made the basket, who didn't. It's about looking at trends and saying, hey, we're not seeing what they've been talking about. For the past 6 to 8 weeks, we've crippled the economy. There's a lot of domestic issues going on. Is social isolation warranted for the healthy?
So I understand that you guys are seeing drawing different conclusions from the same data. Why is that? That's my question.
Because we're actually seeing the patients. Dr. Fauci hasn't seen a patient for 20 years. I'm just saying, it's in general, a lot of the figureheads are not, it's like the general contractor versus the sub. He's not seeing patients, he's in an ivory tower. And we have a world of respect for him. He's a world-renowned immunologist. Two different things. He's an academic. We've dealt with academics all of our life. I did surgery at USC and Loma Linda, all academics. But academics and reality is two different things.
So you can see in that clip, like the first thing, if you watch this whole press conference, which we do have on CETV because it was pretty much deleted everywhere. CETV is our membership platform, for example, if anybody doesn't have this. You can go to ctv.one, become a member. But you can, when you're watching this whole press conference, I'm looking at it and I'm going, these guys are extremely calm. I legitimately trust the state of being, the state of emotion that they're coming from. It's transparent. They're putting it out all on the table. And these are like important aspects when you're looking at, again, just kind of deciphering, what does Tony Fauci look like when he's up there saying, what is a politician like? They always have this mask on. They always have this banter that they're kind of going with. These guys are just two guys. Hey, we're lovingly sharing information. Here's how we feel about something. We felt like it was important. So when I'm looking at, like, they're calm. They're just transparent. Like, that was the first thing that really struck me when I was watching this press conference. Then on top of that, they're legitimately trying to help people. And the one point that he talks there about academics, it's like he's essentially saying, look, these people are academics, right? And we talk about this all the time. You have the armchair scientists. We see it when we get censored by health feedback, for example, right? You have these armchair scientists who sit in universities or who sit in these organizations that, they're not really doing research. They're not really looking through to see what the new and emerging stuff is. They're going off of what they were taught and what narrative they have to maintain. And when we write an article that brings forth something new, these armchair scientists are like, no.
And a lot of them have connections to some organizations who are threatened by information that we're presenting, because you do have a lot of other scientists who oppose these other armchair scientists as well, but they're independent. You're not connected to any institution or organization, You
look at, Dr. Judy Mikovits, who was highly censored. You look at Dr. Russell Blaylock.
There's so many. Even, I forget her name, Cahool or something. There's a doctor from Ireland right now who's a well-known doctor at a university, scientist doctor, and she is also speaking. There's so many.
Is it first name Dolores?
Dolores.
Because that lady too was big on, again, you look at it, it's like these people, the point is they have no conflict of interest. They've spent their whole career.
Sorry to interrupt here. Prof. Dolores Cahill, who's, she is a legendary scientist at a reputable university doing legendary research. These scientists there's dozens and dozens of them, have decades and decades of expertise in the field. Basically, the world's leading experts around this kind of matter, viruses and health and stuff, have all spoken up against the mainstream media. There's mainstream media narrative. There's so many of them creating information and awareness, and nobody is giving them any attention. That nobody knows about them. Like my dad who watches CNN, nobody knows about they're just getting one narrative. These government scientists. Meanwhile, there's so many experts revealing so much like bombshell information about the coronavirus that are. It's amazing. It's like all these people can't be stupid conspiracy theorists and be wrong.
No.
It's quite clear what's going on.
Right, and you have hashtags. This is going back to the sort of the underlying emotional stuff that we get caught into. And if you're watching, you're listening to this too, it's like, see where you are on this, because if you're someone that's questioning, the COVID-19 narrative, you may not necessarily want to look at people who believe it as like the bad guy or as the sheep or whatever, but just to really understand the mechanisms of how, because when we understand the mechanisms as to how people are manipulated or how perceptions are created or how we hold on to information and we refuse to question, even when we decide on a narrative, we always got to be, continuing being open, allowing it to evolve, right? And when we see so much of this stuff, we just always go back to, okay, well, this is my side and this is this side, right? And we don't listen to anything. And yes, the media will continue to put out an idea, but it doesn't mean we have to listen to it. The media will continue to push an agenda, but it doesn't mean that we have to always fall for it, right? And this is where learning how to think or how to assess a situation is a lot more important than just listening to something, saying, okay, here's my new expert, here's my new God, and I just listen to everything that says. We should always be questioning, we should always be open. And I think this is the interesting part of some of these other doctors and scientists coming forward, is it's like they're getting absolutely no media time because it just doesn't match the narrative. And going back to these two doctors, when they threw the press conference out there, it was shattering to the COVID narrative. And YouTube comes right away, takes it down, and they go, there's two quick quotes here I got to read from the CEO of YouTube. The first one is, she says, anything that would go against the World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy. So they create a policy on the spot. if you're saying anything that goes against what the World Health Organization recommends, we're getting rid of it.
Yeah. And at the same time, they put YouTube put this out. Vimeo banned a documentary that exposed the pharmaceutical influence within the World Health Organization.
Yeah.
And that documentary it took 7 years to make. It was well done. It featured people from within the World Health Organization, ex-executives, current employees. It also featured people from within the pharmaceutical industry, and it was quite clear the influence that they have, the big pharma over the World Health Organization. And at the same time, WikiLeaks reminded everyone again that they had released documents a few years ago about that clearly show the pharmaceutical influence within the World Health Organization. So we're basically seeing World Health Organization, who I think is a big pharmaceutical company, basically banning anything that threatens what's going to profit, which is a vaccine. And again, this virus is not only used to sell a vaccine, it's so many different authoritarian measures. Like Edward Snowden said that they're using the virus to push more authoritarian measures on the human population that will stay in place just like they did after 9/11. So
sure,
a lot
absolutely.
To talk,
And that goes back to the whole thing too. It's like you even look at pharmaceutical industry and their influence over Congress. I mean, this has been talked about a lot of times.
Bigger than oil.
They spend 2 times as much money as every other industry on lobbying Congress, which means, think of all the big ones. Oil, right? We talk about war as an industry, right? It's bigger than that. We talk about anything in the food industry, it's bigger than that.
Dominates.
Right? They just dominate. So what you're really looking at here is, World Health Organization, pharmaceutical companies, right? Their stakeholders, their owners, and so forth, in so many ways are creating public policy, something you don't vote on, something that, we don't really have a say over as people. It happens. And there was this interesting quote, and, this is funny because China's been obviously in the news a lot for the past year. There's been, from a Republican perspective, like China's almost like this enemy right now. And of course the left is kind of being like, well, what it is, right? And I was watching this documentary and somebody was explaining like the way China doesn't, so you might have a lot of billionaires in China. There's more billionaires in China now than there are in the United States. And they were saying though, the one difference though in the way China functions is, you may have the Communist Party that has been sort of running things for the past while, but capital in China, it doesn't have the same policy-making influence as it does in the United States. So the way the guy was explaining it was like, if you have a ton of capital in China, it does not mean you're going to be able to just control politicians and create policy. It's actually almost impossible to do that, the guy was saying. But if in the United States, it doesn't matter who's in power, left or right, Republican, Democrat, whoever has the greatest amount of capital can essentially control all the policy and make everything happen, which essentially means that although it doesn't matter who you vote for in China because it's just the Communist Party that's going to run it, it also doesn't matter who you vote for in the United States because it's the same people who are going to be running it. The kicker is this. In China, they wake up every morning knowing we don't really have a say because the Communist Party is going to just do what they're going to do. Whereas in the United States, people are under the illusion that they have a say. They wake up thinking, I have a say, but they don't.
We don't. We live in the illusion of democracy. That's why so many people are raising concerns with so many issues and they're going completely ignored. Like 5G is a perfect example. Like so many people are raising awareness about potential health effects of 5G.
Sure. Not
Not even addressed, completely ignored, no safety testing at all. So concerns that threaten the elite are being brushed aside, they're being ridiculed. Meanwhile, here we are saying we live in a democracy. We don't live in a democracy at all. We live under an authoritarian government who makes us think we live under a democracy. We're accepting this authoritarianism, kind of like it's like a bird in a cage that's let out into a bigger cage, or a bird born in a cage that doesn't know, it thinks it's free. It doesn't know what's on the outside. It's that kind of thing,
For sure, and we got to address this because people are going to say this. They've been saying this for years. I mean, we've been doing this work for about 11 years, and actually, in a couple of days, we celebrate our 11-year anniversary. But it's like, people are going to say, wow, this is negative. If we all just focus our consciousness on, right? Because we talk about consciousness a lot here, right? If we focus our consciousness on creating a better world, on doing this, it happens. We don't want people to feel hopeless by talking about this information. You're saying that people are powerless. No, the point is this. in this, we talk about this in the CE protocol. Sometimes people will criticize the work that we do because they'll say, well, you guys aren't really helping to do anything because you're just reporting on information and you're not giving anything for anybody to do. And it's like, that's not correct. We provide a ton of information. We provide a lot of different things in terms of protocols, in terms of things to look at to help us change the way we think, expand our mind, expand our consciousness. And ultimately, we're at a stage in human evolution where we have to break the illusion. Some of us want to already be creating that, utopian world and this, that, whatever, but we're at a stage where we have to break the illusion. And that's a very big part of what's happening. We're going to get that, in the second part of this show, we're going to really get into that a lot more deeply. But we're at a stage where breaking the illusion is so important. And having people, we talk about this stuff, we spend the time doing this because we can't go out there and say, oh, let's change the way we live our lives. Well, guys, we can thrive. We can do beautiful things. We can really create a world that's great. If people don't realize that we're living in a world that is purposefully trying to oppress, trying to suppress consciousness, our ability to thrive, all that sort of stuff. If we're living in a world where we don't realize the authoritarian nature of what's going on within our government. And we see it turned up. The heat's turned up every single year that goes by. Things get worse and worse and worse. And people have been saying this forever, right? We hear a lot of, guys, read 1984 because that's what's happening now. And every single year people are like, nah, conspiracy theory, no. But it keeps becoming true,
and
right?
COVID's just further pushing that forward with contact tracing and facial recognition. And these are all excuses, potential tracking of certain information, like all these events are being used.
Sure. And people will say
a lot of times they're created. That's why there's so much controversy around the origins of the virus.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of information out there suggesting that it was created and manipulated. Obviously, mainstream media jumps on it, deems it a conspiracy theory, this and that, without even addressing the evidence or countering the evidence. All they use is ridicule.
Sure.
Ridicule.
And again, these are the questions, why we have to do this content, why we have to think about this stuff is because people, hey, we want a spiritual awakening. We want this conscious awakening. We want to live in a world where we can thrive. Don't talk about this stuff. It's like, this is the conscious awakening. Yeah. This is the spiritual awakening. If world events are happening, things are going on that are helping us to realize the world that we think we're living in, we're not. And that's not a disempowering thing. No. That's an insanely empowering thing.
It's an empowering thing. And that's what's going to change humanity. And that's what we're going through right now. And that's what COVID's revealing, And all they use is fear. They use fear and hysteria to control us and make us believe certain things. And it's a revolution right now. People are seeing through all the crap.
Yeah,
and it's like masks. Should we talk about masks?
Yeah, let's talk about masks.
It's like masks, basically.
Let me just throw this vitamin C thing down real quick because this goes back to YouTube. We kind of went on a small tangent there. We apologize, but it was good. Yeah. We had to throw that down. The reality of the situation here, YouTube, after they made that initial comment, right? The CEO there, she says, anything that goes against World Health Organization, we're gonna basically censor. They come out with vitamin C. She says the same thing. Look, here's the quote. Of course, anything that is medically unsubstantiated, so like people saying, take vitamin C, take turmeric, like those will cure you, right? This is what she's saying. Those are the examples of things that would be in violation of our policy. So,
wait, I just got to say this like I did before in China, published peer-reviewed research, clinical trials. It's known that vitamin C helps. And in China, the moderate to severe cases of COVID-19 completely recovered because of vitamin C.
Well, and here's the thing. Look at the wording that they use. This goes back to, again, let's as we learn from independent media, and again, it's not just, I've been thinking about this lately. I don't think it's good enough anymore to just say, hey, we need independent media, we need alternative media. I feel I want to challenge the idea and say, having conscious media, so how we define that is being conscious of what? It's being conscious of who we truly are, how our ideas are formed, how our beliefs are formed, and then you bring facts into that equation. So as you're talking about the facts of what's happening, you're also talking about our tendency to think the way we do. Where do we get our ideas? Why are ideas presented the way they are? So what we're conscious of are the inner workings of how our perceptions are formed and how we can expand our perceptions, expand our way of thinking, expand our consciousness such that we engage with our world in a different manner. So that's what conscious media is to us. So why conscious media is important right now is because when we can start to learn to look at the wording of what's used here, look at the way the mainstream media uses various tactics they use. You know, the CEO says these things will cure you. I don't remember that many people, anybody, we were censored for the vitamin C stuff. I don't remember anybody saying this will cure you.
It's basically just an exploration of vitamin C.
What is it doing?
These scientists and doctors who are using vitamin C in China did not say it will cure you. They basically tested it and said that it works in some cases. In most cases it works and it can be an effective treatment. But all we get is ridicule in North America, not exploration. A doctor in Detroit was treating his patients with intravenous vitamin C. And FBI rated him. Yeah. So that's what we see here in North America.
And charged him with nothing.
Which
is interesting.
So
they're just trying to shut down the narrative. And you know what was interesting is he was treating first responders, meaning he was treating nurses and so forth that were, you know, experiencing stuff or in front of stuff every day. And I think this was my theory on it. It was like, when I first saw that story, I thought to myself, well, they're essentially just trying to not allow the frontline workers who are going to see the effects of this. They don't want them then entering into the hospital saying, hey guys, I haven't been doing IV-C and it's working pretty good.
Which happened in New York. Many New York hospitals saw success with intravenous vitamin C and were using it. There's a big article in the New York Post about that.
Right.
And that happened because of the success seen by doctors in China.
Yeah.
So it was obvious. Even doctors and scientists in China were calling out fact checkers for doing what they were doing in North America.
For sure. Absolutely. And so it's like, at the end of the day, you know, why are we censoring these voices? Why are we censoring these people? You have, going back to these two doctors.
If anything, there should be exploration, not censorship.
We should be excited, right? We should be excited about what people have to say and explore it. And I get there's a danger, perhaps, if you want to use the word danger. It's a loaded word to use right now, but there's potentially something not good about information spreading that is false, right? But if we can learn as a society to really seek out and look at information, like read beyond the headline. Like if you see a headline, actually click the article and read it. Don't just share the headline thinking you know the full story. It's important to read something, right? But going back to these two doctors, Dr. Harrison and Masahai, I don't know how to pronounce it. I actually didn't hear him say it. But if you look at it, they talk about this whole idea of the lockdown. And this was one of the main reasons why they wanted to, because we go back to the idea, why the lockdown? Why are we doing this?
Even in that interview, they questioned whether they're making COVID more dangerous than it really is, because they want to push these measures on the human population.
Let's play the clip, because they talk about it here.
Seeing is when you take human beings and you say, go into your house, clean all your counters, Lysol them down, you're going to kill 99% of viruses and bacteria, wear a mask, don't go outside. What does that do to our immune system? Our immune system is used to touching. We share bacteria, staphylococcal, streptococcal bacteria, viruses. We develop an immune response daily to this stuff. When you take that away from me, my immune system drops. As I shelter in place, my immune system drops. You keep me there for months, it drops more. And now I'm at home, hand washing vigorously, washing the counters, worried about things that are indeed what I need to survive. Let's follow the science. This is immunology, folks. This is microbiology. This is what we've combined together. We have 40 years of experience in this. This is common sense immunology.
So quarantining and social distancing is worse for us, you're saying?
It decreases your immune system. You can't build an immune system by... If someone has a reduced immune system, you hide them away because they can't build an immune system. If you have a normal functioning immune system, you need interaction. When a child is in a womb, you're in this protected environment. When you come out, you have almost no immune system. You develop that through touching your mouth, touching your eyes, virus, bacteria, immune response, IgG, IgM. This is how you build a strong immune system.
You think people are worrying too much?
Of course they are, but that's from media telling them to. I am telling them sheltering in place decreases your immune system. And then as we all come out of shelter in place with a lower immune system and start trading viruses, bacteria, what do you think is going to happen? Disease is going to spike. And then you've got disease spike amongst a hospital system with furloughed doctors and nurses. This is not the combination we want to set up for a healthy society.
So you can see in there, it's like he's essentially saying, do you want an immune system? Do you want to build your immune system? Do you want to have, become in contact with all these various viruses, all these various things, bacteria and so forth, some of which are very beneficial. We know that, right? Again, I think he says that, at the end of the day, we have all this research, all this science from decades supporting the idea that we must come in contact with various forms of bacteria, some of which we call good bacteria, to allow ourselves to build a strong immune system by providing the lockdown and by telling everybody constantly wash your hands, constantly clean all surfaces, disinfect everything. You're lowering the immune system. The longer that goes on, the worse things get. Yeah. Why would a doctor be censored for such a thing when it's basic science? And he uses the word common sense. It's like we're not using common sense. And it's like, this is what we've been trying to say since the beginning. And it's funny because you hear a lot of backlash from people and you hear all these different things because of what mainstream media is saying. And again, it's like all we're helping, going back to the awakening aspect of it, all that's happening is when something so aggressively goes against common sense, it presents an opportunity for us to look at it and go, does this make any sense?
Exactly. And that's what's happening right now.
Right.
And the lockdown, it's interesting because something just popped in my head. I came across some information showing that in the UK, for example, thousands of seniors have died as a result of lockdown because they couldn't get access to healthcare because of people.
Medication.
If you didn't have COVID, then we can't treat you. We're treating COVID right now.
Right.
So the lockdown might have actually killed more people than COVID has in the elderly population.
In the elderly population, yeah. And again, going into some of the stats and the death numbers, like that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, and lockdown's another topic because you get into economics, people profiting off of economic collapse, this and that. Lockdown to scare people to, this is real, this is dangerous, so okay, we can't go back to completely normal, like Bill Gates said, until we get a vaccine. So there's multiple reasons. If COVID is not as dangerous as it really is, and the powers that be behind this lockdown, like there's an ulterior motive for the lockdown.
Sure.
For sure. It's not in our best interests.
No, and this is again
just like wearing masks. Is wearing masks in our best interest, or is this just basically another tool to keep the fear going until we get a vaccine? Or something?
For sure. Here's a quote going back to the masks. This is from the same two doctors, right? He says, when you wear gloves that transfer disease everywhere, those gloves have bacteria all over them. I'm wearing gloves, not helping you. Your mask that you're wearing for days, you touch the outside of it, COVID, and then touch your mouth. This doesn't make any sense. We wear masks, this is doctors, right? So we wear masks in an acute setting to protect us. We're not wearing masks right now, so this is during the press conference. Why is that? Because we understand microbiology, we understand immunology, and we want strong immune systems. I don't want to hide in my home, develop a weak immune system, and then come out and get disease. We've both been in the ER through swine flu, through bird flu. Did we shut down for those? Obviously not. Were they much less dangerous than COVID? Is the flu less dangerous than COVID? Let's look at the death rates. No, it's not. They're similar in prevalence and in death rates. So, obviously this was at the time when numbers hadn't quite stacked up quite as much, but even when we're looking at death rates, the numbers that are coming out now, it's extremely, extremely low. Even in China, actually, just before we jumped on here, I think one of the latest studies came out was saying something like 0.026.
The death rate is extremely low, and even with the number of deaths that have been attributed to COVID that are not a result of COVID, lots of information and evidence suggesting that it drives the rate even lower.
And again, doctors in that case, they were actually pressured to write COVID on people's
it's made quite clear. Like I forget her name, the public health director of Illinois a couple months ago basically said, if you die of a heart attack but test positive for COVID, it's marked as a COVID death.
Right, and we got George Floyd, right? He dies from a cop kneeling on his neck.
And even they started questioning whether he died of COVID. That's crazy.
Well, they basically said that he tested positive for COVID. It's like, why is that even a news story?
Why is that even mentioned?
We all see why he died.
Yeah, and when it comes to masks, it's like the COVID whatever molecule or whatever. It's so small it goes right through a cloth mask. And if you look at the peer-reviewed literature on the effectiveness of masks to prevent respiratory illnesses. There's studies, like a study published in 2015. There's not many studies on this topic, whether masks are effective or not, but in the British Medical Journal, titled A Cluster of Randomized Trial of Cloth Masks Compared with Medical Masks in Healthcare Workers. They basically found that cloth masks actually increase the risk of respiratory infection, and cloth masks are actually dangerous. You should not be wearing cloth masks. Meanwhile, you hear on the radio from our health authorities, a cloth mask is fine, anything will do, just cover So what's this? You have studies showing that wearing a cloth mask is dangerous, and you have others showing that there's no evidence at all that cloth masks are effective at all for respiratory viruses. They basically don't do anything.
Sure.
Okay? Yet we have our government health authorities saying, wear a mask, and now it's socially taboo. If you're not wearing a mask, you feel like an idiot and people are looking at you. Yeah. Meanwhile, it's quite clear that cloth masks don't do anything.
Right.
Okay? And even medical masks, the N95 mask, it's questionable. It's not solid that they actually help.
Right.
And in fact, I wrote about this a couple months ago. Masks, you're breathing in your own carbon dioxide. It can lead to a number of health complications. You definitely shouldn't be wearing a mask if you're exercising. And then the fact that this virus probably isn't even airborne. Masks are probably doing more harm, just like the lockdown, than they are doing good. Okay. Well, sorry, I'm ranting here, but you have those doctors. Yeah. A number of doctors have come out and said that, there's so many. Just go and look up scholarly articles on the effectiveness of masks for preventing respiratory diseases, and you'll see what I'm talking about. This makes no sense.
Yeah, it's true, and this is the reality of the situation, right? Is you have
this is a fear. Sorry to keep interrupting, but this is to pump fear into the population, and in fact, sorry, okay, I just mentioned that study in 2015 on masks. A year after, in 2016, a study titled "The Surgical Mask is a Bad Fit for Risk Reduction." It goes into the fear aspect of masks and how masks promote fear. Right. And they talk about Asian countries, how a lot of, even before this pandemic, a lot of Asian people wore masks because a fear of disease and pandemic has been created, and that wearing a mask reinforces that fear in the minds of many. All these people outside I see walking around wearing a mask, you know that they're scared of the virus. Tell, I'm not going to wear a mask. It's mandatory to wear a mask in grocery stores right now. I wear it because I just don't want to create a kerfuffle. I don't want to make the other person feel uncomfortable, so I'm just going to wear a mask.
I'm telling you, just drive 15 minutes the other way. There's no masks.
Yeah.
No masks.
It's
And that's the thing is like I won't go to the local businesses here. Like I have another place I can go to 15 minutes, but I won't go here because the county instituted mandatory masks. And I just won't go. Yeah, and it's not going to
what happen. They want to do with these people who are promoting these agencies, government agencies. They use the hearts of people. Yeah. So it's like wearing a mask is a good thing. You're saving lives potentially by wearing a mask. So basically, questioning that narrative makes you feel like an idiot. And
this goes back to the conscious difference, right? And this is why we want people to reflect on things because this is what we do, right? And then you might already do this, but it's like, when someone has to appeal to when they have to manipulate emotions, when they have to appeal to these ideas of getting you on a side, right? Why? Why are they why can't the information itself just sit for what it is? Why is it that we have to manipulate people to feel a certain way? If we just share information, you would be able to determine how you feel versus how somebody telling you how you should feel about something. So with the masks, it's like we're telling you to feel that you need to wear one and that someone who doesn't wear one is somehow not a good person. And that's how you should feel. Whereas we're saying, here's the masks, here's the information about it, and we've written about this quite a bit, and you decide. You decide how to feel. You decide what you want to do. You decide. Because
ideally, a great government would be okay, we want you to wear a mask, and here's the evidence why. Here's the evidence why we think masks are effective, and not make it mandatory. Basically, you still have a choice. But the thing is, they'll never present that information. They'll never present the information that we just talked about, showing that masks aren't effective and in some cases can be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, look, there was the nurses coming forward saying, hey, people are coming into the ER and they have like headaches and they feel weird and they can't breathe. And the first question they ask them is, they're like, have you been wearing a mask? And they go, yeah, for like 4 to 6 hours. And they're like, well, that caused every single symptom you're experiencing is from the mask, right? And this is the reality of the situation is you see people driving in cars, passing out in the car, getting into an accident. You see people wearing a mask for 6 to 8 hours, they're passing out. It's like, it blocks your ability. What ends up happening is you keep taking in over and over and over again the same breath that you're breathing over and over and over again. You start to change the way your physiology functions, and all of a sudden...
Quote from a study that I just read, and that I just talked about that was published in 2015.
Yeah.
The physiological effects of breathing elevated inhaled CO2 may include changes in visual performance, modified exercise endurance, headaches. The psychological effects include decreased reasoning and alertness, increased irritability, headache, dizziness, perspiration, short-term memory loss. All these should be, if we're being told to wear masks, these risks and warnings should be included.
They should.
To be honest, the people beaming this stuff out saying we should be wearing masks they're probably just listening to their boss.
Or mainstream media or whatever it is.
Just doing their job without,
And again, we're at a point, like, why do we talk about this stuff? Why do we talk about the masks and the gloves? It's because, we're at a point where at some point, like we're seeing, in the US right now with some of the unrest, there's a lot of different perspectives on that. We're going to talk about that in our show coming out on Friday called The Takeaway, brand new show on CETV. But we're going to be talking about how, non-compliance, meaning I don't have to judge something as really stupid, or I don't have to pick a side or do all these things. I go with what I feel. This doesn't make sense. I've looked at it and I go, I'm not complying with this anymore, right? And this idea of non-compliance is without all the anger, without all the emotion, without all the aggression. It allows you to think clearly. It allows you to take action. It allows you to unite people under the idea of saying, hey, do you want this to continue? I don't care what political side you're on. I don't care what religious affiliation you have. I don't care any of those things. I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care any of that. Do you want to live in a world that looks like this? No? Okay, so then we got to stop complying, right? And we talk about this stuff with the gloves and masks because it's a big thing. People are doing it. It's not helping them. And they're not being told by the health organizations. They're not being told by the media. So someone has to share this information and someone has to allow us to see that, hey, we don't need to go down this route, right? And again, if we want strong immune systems, we got to avoid the gloves and the mask. Now, if you're already sick, or if you are extremely immune deficient or elderly, maybe you consider masks and gloves. But other than that, nobody should be wearing masks.
And now they're really pushing testing, which we should talk about more testing and how there's some weird stuff going on with the testing kits and what's happened with regards to testing. Maybe we could talk. We've been going for an hour now. Maybe we could talk about.
Well, you got just real quick here. You got. The doctors, like they were asked, the same two doctors, Dr. Erickson and Masahai, they were asked by the news team that interviewed them. They're like, so we could all go outside, no gloves, no masks, and everybody would be safe. And they're like, yeah, we'll play the clip.
For hundreds of years, we relied on herd immunity. Viruses kill people. End of story. The flu kills people, COVID kills people. But for the rest of us, we develop herd immunity. We develop the ability to take this virus in and defeat it. And for the vast majority, 95% of those around the globe, this is true. And when we look at people that have locked down and people that haven't locked down, we have massive data. It is not statistically significant whether you lock down or not. So why are we doing it?
Do you think it's safe for the state to lift the lockdown?
Yes.
Would it be safe for people to be outside right now?
Yes. I'm outside with no mask.
Are the gloves and masks maybe a little bit too much right now? Is that kind of what you're saying in some sense?
Again, do you want your immune system built or do you want it not built? The building blocks of your immune system is virus and bacteria, end of story.
And you couple what they just said there with the idea that the CDC came out, I don't know, a few weeks ago, essentially saying, the virus doesn't really live on surfaces as we previously thought. Like it's really not going to pass that way. It's like, well, hold on. It doesn't really live on surfaces. Right?
Yeah.
It's not going to pass that way. Asymptomatic people, it's extremely rare that they spread it.
Also,
and it's not airborne.
Yeah. So and you have like the Tanzania president testing. He tested car engine oil, a bunch of fruit, goat. Fruit tested positive for COVID-19.
Right.
So that basically means
the tests don't work.
The tests don't work. The tests are contaminated, or they're just labeling people. Yep, let's label this one positive. Let's label this one negative. Let's label this one positive.
So can we even trust any of the numbers?
Like there's so much controversial stuff and so much evidence that has come out here showing foul play. It's unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. And to us, people like us who look into it, it's so obvious. But again, when I go around some of my friends, like my parents, no idea.
Yeah.
No idea about this stuff. All they get is from the mainstream media. And some don't believe it because they're like, I don't really trust it. But the majority of them are just like, yeah, this is This is crazy, and which is why you see such a harsh reaction to the information we're saying, and people calling you a conspiracy theorist and this and that. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Sure, it is. And so we'll wrap up this first part here, this first hour, if you will, and we'll get into the second hour coming up on CETV. Is for members only. So you can go to CETV.1, become a member, listen to this second hour, watch the second hour, whatever version you want. In that, we're going to be talking about a Vatican letter that was written. Very, very powerful stuff.
A letter from a former high-ranking Vatican official.
Yep. And then we're going to be talking about how COVID-19 is causing all these awakenings. But within that, this is one of the most important parts we're going to get into is we'll talk a little bit about how we can more effectively be change makers, how we can more effectively share this information, connect with people on it, not create all the emotional divides, right? I see a lot of people that are angry when they see people wearing masks and gloves because they're getting caught up in the emotions of they're doing something I don't believe in. And we got to become free of that. And we're going to get into that more in this second part here. So thanks again so much for watching this part, listening to this part, and we'll catch you next time on the CE Show.